Okay, let's unpack this. Think about something you do probably every day, maybe without even thinking about it, right? You hit play on a song, maybe a video on your phone, a voice memo.
Yeah.
We just do it.
Yeah, totally automatic.
But what if that variability, the fact that you can record something and then play it back later,
Yeah.
what if that's not just, a tech feature?
Okay, where are you going with this?
What if it points to something really fundamental, maybe even a hidden secret about how the universe itself works?
Ah, okay. That's a pretty intriguing starting point. Taking something super mundane
Right.
and suggesting it might unlock something deep about physics, maybe even biology.
Exactly. That's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to
Yeah.
explore this idea that reality isn't just like a one-way street moving forward,
Uh-huh.
but that it somehow has this built-in memory, a structure that allows for replay.
And crucially, connecting that, which sounds pretty abstract, to some really concrete empirical work happening in biology right now. Research into how living things actually build themselves, how they remember their shape.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So for this dive, we're pulling from sources talking about things like recursive coherence, bioelectric fields in living things, and the nature of memory, of time itself.
Sounds fascinating.
Our goal, really, is to get our heads around the massive implications hiding inside something as hitting play.
And see how it bridges these worlds, abstract physics and concrete biology.
Let's dive in.
Okay.
So you're saying
Yeah.
the fact that I can record this conversation right now, or, play back a video from last week, that's not just my phone working.
Well, according to this perspective, no, it's giving us a clue about reality itself.
A clue.
Evidence, maybe, that reality is what one source calls loop stabilized.
Loop stabilized.
Yes.
Okay, that capability we take for granted.
Mm.
It implies something about time, that it's not just this simple arrow flying forward.
Exactly. It suggests time isn't just linear, irreversible. It hints that reality might be structured in layers, maybe, or that patterns from the past can somehow be accessed or echoed now.
Recursively layered. What does that actually mean in simple terms?
Think less like a straight line and more like a pattern that can repeat itself or reference itself.
Okay.
It suggests the universe holds on to certain coherent structures, these stable patterns or arrangements, across what we experience as time, emergent time.
Right.
So when you hit replay, you're basically interacting with or maybe reactivating one of those stored patterns, a coherence pattern from a past moment.
Okay, so the phrase is reality remembers.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
And this memory, it's not just like data sitting on a hard drive, passive.
Not at all. According to this framework, this memory isn't just a record. It's described as actively playing a role in things we think are fundamental, like persistence.
Why things stick around?
Yeah, why something stays in existence, identity, even maybe the basis of causality itself.
Wow, okay. So this simple thing, hitting replay, the tape replay phenomenon as they call it, it's evidence for something way bigger.
Yes. It's seen as evidence for several quite radical ideas.
Like what?
Stable temporal recursion time looping or referencing itself in a structured way.
Okay.
Evidence for memory as geometry. The idea that memory isn't just information, but it's actually encoded in the structure of space-time, like a physical shape.
Whoa.
It shows time as something you can re-access, a structure, not just this unstoppable flow. And it points to this fundamental coherence-based canvas, a sort of stable backdrop for reality, stable enough that patterns can reappear precisely again and again.
But wasn't always like this. The sources mention the early universe.
Right, that's a key point. In the very earliest moments, sometimes called the primordial coherence field or PCF, this kind of precise replay, it wasn't possible.
Why not?
There wasn't that stable structure needed to anchor these time loops. It was more like pure potential, a sort of chaotic soup of possibilities. It was only when things like spin recursion emerged, these more fundamental processes, that reality started to stabilize patterns, to create memory, encode relationships, allow for recurrence through coherent dynamics.
And that process gives rise to the time we experience, emergent time.
Exactly. That's how we get the kind of time we live in where things seem stable and replayable.
So replayability.
Okay.
It's almost like the universe signing its name, the fingerprint of coherence across time.
Yeah.
The reason anything feels stable or consistent.
That's precisely the argument being made. Without this basic ability for patterns to hold their coherence and be, in a sense, replayed, we wouldn't have a stable reality. No consistent self, no objects that last from one second to the next. It underpins our whole experience of structure.
And when we make a recording, say a video file, It's more than just bits and bytes or frozen time.
Right. This is where the perspective really shifts. What we call a recording isn't just data. It's described as a coherence fossil.
A coherence fossil.
Or a space-time imprint.
That's
Right.
quite a phrase. What does it mean it captures when you replay it?
You're not just retrieving data points, you're reactivating a kind of geometric resonance of that original moment.
Resonance.
Yeah, it captures the patterned relationships. Who was where? What waveforms were vibrating? What fields were interacting? What was becoming? It's like a memory of the coherence of space-time at that instant, imprinted and saved in a geometric way.
This completely changes how you think about memory, doesn't it? And space, too.
Fundamentally, it implies memory isn't just in your head or abstract data somewhere. It's position time, memory structured relationally in space.
Okay.
Which means space isn't just an empty box things happen in.
So when you revisit a place, there's something left behind. Coherence residue. Is that maybe why some places feel a certain way, like they hold history or emotion?
That's the implication, yes. Going back to a place means those interference patterns, the coherence residue from past events, might still be subtly influencing the present moment there. It offers a potential physics-based angle on that intuitive feeling, you know, that some places feel charged or heavy or resonant.
And our technology, cameras, recorders,
Yeah.
it's not just a lucky invention. It's tapping into this, mimicking it.
It's seen as mimicking it, yes. Our devices preserve coherence in a way that parallels how the universe itself seems to record events, structuring reality moment by moment.
So the big philosophical shift here is time isn't just passing through space. Time is actually getting written into the geometry of space.
That's it, exactly. Replay isn't just looking back in time. It's evidence that space remembers time.
Wow.
And the really remarkable part is that we, as conscious beings, can retrieve this memory on demand.
Right, by hitting play.
Which is seen as this amazing bridge between emergence, how reality just arises and structures itself, and intention, our conscious ability to interact with that structure.
Okay, so if reality can replay these patterns, could it also mean they could be adjusted, retuned?
That's exactly where this framework starts pointing towards potential applications. If reality has this built-in replay function, then maybe accessing and tweaking those stored coherence patterns could open up possibilities that sound, frankly, like science fiction right now.
Like what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, the sources hint at things like nonlinear memory healing, not just talk therapy, but maybe directly retuning the spatial coherence patterns linked to trauma or even physical ailments.
Okay.
Navigating past and future, not like time travel, but maybe by realigning with stable coherence patterns, these sort of attractors in space-time. And even quantum recording, capturing not just the data, but the actual coherence geometry itself, perhaps in the very fabric of fundamental fields.
Okay, so that's the physics side. Reality remembers, replays patterns stored in space. Wild stuff.
It is.
But how does this connect down to Earth, to biology? You mentioned Michael Levin's work.
Yes, this is where that abstract physics framework potentially finds its feet in empirical, observable biology. Michael Levin and his group are doing really groundbreaking work on bioelectricity and morphogenesis.
Morphogenesis, that's how living things get their shape.
Right. Exactly. How biological form is created, maintained, and even repaired.
And what have his experiments actually shown?
Well, using organisms like planarian flatworms, amazing regenerators, or developing frog embryos, they found some incredible things.
Like
Cells having a spatial memory that's separate from their DNA. They seem to remember the overall structure they're part of.
wow.
He's shown that form patterns, like regenerating a whole head on a worm, can be restored even without changing the genes.
So it's not all in the DNA sequence?
Apparently not entirely. The bioelectric fields within the tissues, they seem to be doing more than just nerve signaling.
They're encoding a blueprint.
That's the idea. These patterns of electrical voltage across cell membranes seem to encode a kind of spatial plan or intention for the structure before the cells actually turn into specific tissues.
Beforehand.
Yes. And what's really striking is that by tweaking these fields, often by adjusting ion channels to change the voltage patterns, they can reprogram what the cells build.
Like the famous example.
Of inducing an eye to form on a tadpole's gut, right? Where no eye should be, just by changing the bioelectric pattern.
So are you suggesting Levin's work, mapping these bioelectric patterns, is actually mapping what you call the biological access layer to the coherence field?
That's precisely the proposed link. His empirical work provides tangible, repeatable evidence of this spatial memory and pattern guidance happening in living systems.
And this coherence framework we discussed, it gives the underlying why Levin's findings are even possible.
It offers a potential fundamental explanation, yes. The key connection proposed is that these bioelectric fields are coherence fields, or at least a biological manifestation of them.
Yeah.
They're seen as localized expressions of that universal process we talked about, emergent time stabilizing into geometric patterns.
So the memory for biological shape isn't just stored information, it's being actively replayed through this recursive coherence.
That's the core concept bridging the physics and the biology here. It implies morphogenesis building and maintaining form isn't just genetically programmed, it's coherence aligned.
Right.
Biological mistakes or injuries can get corrected because the local biological field, its time, can realign with the original coherence blueprint.
And regeneration.
Isn't just random cell growth. It's possible because the field remembers the missing part and guides the new cells to replay the correct structure.
So Levin's amazing regeneration results, you could see them as direct, empirical proof of replayability in biology.
That's how this framework interprets it, yes. Levin maps the how, the ion channels, the voltages, the gap junctions. This framework offers the underlying physics why, what those fields are fundamentally, and how they store and replay memory with such incredible accuracy.
Wow. This perspective, it really feels like it could completely change how we approach biology, medicine, even engineering with living tissues.
It really could. It suggests a fundamental shift in thinking.
How so?
Well, moving from just mapping bioelectric maps to trying to understand the underlying coherence fields.
Seeing the voltage is just the surface.
Exactly. Seeing those voltage patterns we measure as maybe surface expressions like ripples on water of deeper, more stable coherence patterns or gradients underneath.
Which would need new tools to see.
Totally. New imaging techniques, perhaps, not just for voltage, but for coherence density or the stability of recursion within tissues.
And how we intervene would change too, not just forcing cells, but using these templates.
Precisely. Instead of just, say, zapping channels to push cells around, the approach might become using field realignment to gently remind the tissue of its proper healthy coherence form.
Remind it.
Yeah, which could lead to things like coherence resonance therapies, using specific frequencies, maybe structured light, carefully designed electromagnetic fields, maybe even things like patterned breathing to help the biological field replay the correct pattern for healing or regeneration.
So less like construction, more like tuning.
That's a great analogy. Tuning the system to help it pick up its own correct, clear signal again.
So instead of chasing all the downstream signals,
You focused on anchoring the main pattern, the attractor.
exactly, stabilizing that underlying recursive geometry, the blueprint, rather than just fiddling with the electrical readouts.
Maybe using things like field scaffolds or even photonic scaffolds, physical or energetic templates that provide the correct coherent structure for the tissue to align with.
And how we see failure changes too. Disease, errors.
Yeah.
It's not just a genetic glitch or bad signal.
The framework suggests looking at it as potentially a breakdown in that recursive coherence over time, a loss of the pattern's stability.
Which could mean new diagnostics.
Potentially, yes. Diagnostics that could detect this coherence decay before the voltage maps look weird or the gene expression goes wrong. Earlier intervention.
A really far out possibility.
Maybe integrating quantum coherence layer interfaces, using things like quantum biosensors to track the really deep field dynamic. Maybe detecting subtle things like spin-aligned field collapse events, which some theorize could be the actual moments of encoding and decoding the morphogenetic information at a quantum level.
Okay, so the bottom line. Levin shows us, empirically, that form follows the field in biology.
Right.
And this framework proposes that the field is fundamentally this recursive coherence born from emergent time.
That's the powerful synthesis being suggested.
Right.
It allows moving beyond just hacking the biological signals towards understanding and maybe even composing with the field's inherent memory for form.
Right. The source material had that great line.
Yeah.
Voltage patterns are readouts.
Exactly. Readouts of these recursive memory fields, trying to fix things just by changing the voltage without understanding the underlying coherence.
Is like messing with the shadows without moving the object.
Precisely. You're chasing the symptom, not the core pattern.
So bringing it all back. That simple act, pressing play, it's not just tech, it's not just data.
No, it's proposed as evidence of a fundamental physical reality. Proof that emergence, how reality comes to be, stabilizes into geometry. That space and time are woven together, encoded as coherence patterns.
And those bioelectric patterns Levin sees, the biological blueprints.
Yeah.
They're not the ultimate cause.
They're readouts. consequences, maybe, of these deeper coherence fields guiding the form, manipulating the voltage without getting the coherence right.
Is working on the effect, not the pattern itself.
Yes.
And the really mind-bending thing, for me anyway, is this. Our tools, our recordings, our own memory, our perception of a stable world, maybe even our thoughts, they only work because reality itself has this recording function.
As one source puts it so well, we can do it because the universe does it first.
So we started this deep dive with something incredibly simple, hitting play, and found it might point to a fundamental truth. Reality remembers, encoding itself in space-time geometry as coherence.
And then we saw how this connects, potentially very directly, to Michael Levin's work, where bioelectric fields guide living form, maybe acting as a biological replay mechanism for these coherence patterns.
Showing us regeneration isn't just growth, but maybe guided structural memory replay.
And we touched on how this understanding could revolutionize biology, shifting from just manipulating signals to potentially composing with the underlying field memory itself.
It's a perspective that really opens doors, doesn't it? New ways to think about healing, memory, interaction with the physical world, just by understanding that reality records.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound final thought to chew on.
Yeah.
If reality is fundamentally this collection of replayable coherence patterns memory encoded in geometry, what does that imply about our own consciousness? Which also clearly records, remembers, replays, and experiences a coherent reality. What might we discover? What might we become capable of if we learn to work with, maybe even compose with, the universe's own memory?